Why is the name Lucifer not in my Bible? Good question. Here's a short answer. Lucifer is not a name for Satan in the Hebrew Bible. And that's why it does not occur in modern translations. The next question is, where did the name come from in the first place then? And here I'll give a general explanation of where this name Lucifer came from. So as a name, Lucifer occurs in Isaiah 14:12 of the KJV. Now it also occurred in earlier English translations leading up to the KJV. But the KJV is going to be the main sticking point here because it has been so influential. Okay, so the name itself arose from two things in combination. The first is this: a conviction that Isaiah 14 is about Satan's fall. The second thing that the name arose from is a transformation of a Latin word into a personal name. So both of these are actually mistaken. So the first one is the easiest thing to debunk. Isaiah 14 is not about the fall of Satan. Satan is nowhere mentioned in the text at all. And this is another case where we must be careful to not make the text say something that it does not say. Similar to what I said about the serpent in Genesis in an earlier video. The passage is about the king of Babylon. Isaiah 14:4 says that. So Isaiah 14 is about the king of Babylon because it says it's about the king of Babylon. And again, Satan is nowhere mentioned at all in the text. Now, who that king actually was is an open question that's discussed in commentaries. You can look it up in your favorite commentators on Isaiah. I don't have time to get into that here. It's also not a relevant issue for what I'm talking about in this video. So what's actually going on in Isaiah 14? Well, modern experts argue that what we have here is mythological language from the time applied to the demise of a tyrannical king. And just so you know, the description of the king of Babylon falls under a larger theme in the Old Testament about kings who receive divine punishment for excessive evil and excessive crimes. So when you read Isaiah 14, the king of Babylon is guilty of violence and pride and will receive a violent death, probably a battlefield death, but doesn't quite say that. And the king will receive an improper burial, which was very egregious in the ancient mindset. The king's dynasty will be terminated, and all of these things fall within the thought world of the Hebrew Bible and the ancient Near East. So, main point here, the text is about the king of Babylon, not about Satan, and the description of the king's demise and the king's evil fits within the theological contours of the Old Testament. Second thing, what about the name? Where did it come from? Well, Isaiah was written in Hebrew, and anyone who knows Hebrew or any other Semitic languages knows that Lucifer is not Hebrew at all. In fact, part of the name Lucifer is the word lux, which means light, and that's clearly Latin. Lucifer is a Latin name. So in no universe was it possible for Lucifer to have been written in a Hebrew text. To put it another way, Lucifer is not a transliteration of a Hebrew name. A transliteration is where you take a name in the original and put it into the target language. So, for example, let's take the name Nathan. In Hebrew, the name is Natan. So then it is rendered in Greek as Nathan, and then English as Nathan. And in Latin, it's spelled just like English, Nathan. So the Hebrew word that lies behind Lucifer is Halel. That sounds nothing like Lucifer. Lucifer is not a transliteration of a name. So the next question is, where did Halel come from? Well, that's a tricky word. Halel is only used one time in this passage. And modern experts agree that it refers to the morning star or Venus. If you notice in the passage, the rendering in modern translations of Halel is either morning star or day star, and it parallels son of the dawn. So it makes sense that it was referring to the morning star. Now, the Septuagint, an early Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, reflects this understanding. And it uses a word that is also not a transliteration, but is rather a translation, which again supports the idea that Venus is in view, or morning star. The Latin translation is Lucifer, which means light bringer, intended to refer to morning star or day star. What happened, though, is that as the tradition grew that Isaiah 14 was about the fall of Satan, the idea that Lucifer was a name for Satan rather than a word referring to Venus or the morning star or day star became prevalent. So then Lucifer was understood not as a word describing the morning star, but as a name for Satan. So subsequently, that interpretation that Lucifer was a name for Satan was carried into the KJV, adopted, I think, from the earlier English translations on which the King James depended. Now, that became a very popular view, but it was not unopposed or uncontested. Most notably, John Calvin opposed it. It's also worth noting Luther's translation. You don't need to know German to see that Lucifer does not surface in this translation of Isaiah 14:12. Now, today, modern translations have rightly abandoned rendering the Hebrew word Halel as Lucifer. That name was never part of the text, and the text is about a king of Babylon, not Satan. But now you know where the name came from and why it's not in your modern translations.